lots of hands touching this, lots of thought in terms of how we want to disseminate information to everybody, and bring the community up to speed. So 26 or so pages of in this deck, and I'm going to try to get through it as quickly as possible so that we can talk about it. And I promise you, by the end of this deck, your heads will all be spinning in a really good way. This is the first time I'm going to bring true context to the economy from a theoretical and hypothetical perspective. First half of the deck, the first part of this deck, is going to be to recap our economy as it currently exists, deep dive into it, explain it to everybody in more detail than we have in the past. And then we're going to really talk about a few changes that we're going to be making to launch more smoothly, and then kind of bring everybody up to speed on the scale of the project, and provide enough information to allow everybody to really evaluate what they want to do in the game relative to the inputs and the outputs. So super excited about today. We're going to get started. I'm going to kick off the AMA with just a disclaimer. Nothing in here is designed to impart any kind of investment advice to anybody. This is a Dynasty fantasy horse racing platform and game that mimics the real world, and we're just here to provide you with enough information for you to make intelligent decisions about how you want to participate in this community. So with that, I'm going to kick this thing off, and we are going to start with slide 2. We had launched the white paper early on, about a year and a half ago when we started developing it, with the notion of 2 tokens, a token called STT and a token called SLK. The STT token and the SLK token were both non-inflationary tokens, meaning that they have fixed supplies. And the STT token was a transactional token designed to allow you to buy and sell things with, and the SLK token was a governance token that gave you the right to vote on certain matters, and essentially operated as a seat at the table. And to many people in the DAO and NFT community, and a governance token is kind of very similar to, or sometimes compared to, equity or equity-like, which creates problems as it relates to securities law. So there's a whole body of law that has been dedicated to developing this. We had decided internally, as we looked at the landscape and we watched this very nascent space develop, to move to a one token model. And we felt like being able to consolidate the governance component with the transactional component would make the game a lot simpler to operate. And candidly speaking, there is no economy in the world today that operates with 2 different currencies. They all have a single currency. And finally, the decision was really driven by the fact that there were no successful blockchain / play to earn / GameFi games that were out there that had operated with 2 tokens that were really successful. So that was a major change for us. We spent a lot of time modeling to make sure that there was literally no economic difference. In fact, there was a significant benefit in that we only had to maintain liquidity in one pool rather than spreading it between 2 different tokens. So SLK, it has a fixed supply of tokens, which means that once it's minted, you can never increase the quantity. And what you see on the right side of this slide is how this gets pre-allocated, right? So the company has a large chunk of the token, has all the tokens in the beginning, and eventually it gets distributed. And then there was a pre-designated allocation for breeding fees, racing prize purses, funds that go to the community, tokens that go to our employees, advisors, and our founders, and then a bucket for marketing. And this is very consistent with the way a lot of these projects in Web3 have worked. What I'd like to do is explain the economy as we have presented it and how it works, and kind of deep dive into the machinations of what makes this thing work. So we've got an ecosystem The ecosystem has a DAO. The DAO serves as the Federal Reserve for the ecosystem. And you have to get this token into the ecosystem. So how does that happen? The token gets into the ecosystem in 4 different ways. It gets into the ecosystem when you own a horse, a Silks horse, or have an interest in a Silks horse that wins a race. And in some cases that just races, because some races pay out even if you don't win. That automatically creates a transaction between the DAO and the wallet of the holder of the horse that won the race, and it transfers the token into the ecosystem that way. Same thing happens with breeding. If you own a mare or a stallion that has produced an offspring, when that offspring turns 1 year old, we tokenize it into an NFT. That NFT gets sold in a mint or an auction or directly, and when those proceeds get received, the smart contract routes a percentage of the transaction to the owner of the mare and to the wallet of the stallion. And now the token is in the ecosystem. Many of you have read the white paper and know that a part of our model is to create a crowdsourced database, information mined in a manner that uses consensus, similar to the way cryptocurrency is mined, and that is a way to earn tokens as well, and for tokens to come into the ecosystem. And finally, the DAO theoretically could directly sell SLK into the ecosystem as well. And that these 4 mechanisms are the channels that create a flow, an initial flow of tokens from the DAO into the hands of people that are living in the ecosystem. The next slide, slide 4, I believe, shows you what happens once the tokens are in the ecosystem. So how do these tokens move within the ecosystem? And there are 4 ways they can move. The first, on the upper left quadrant of the slide, SLK can be used to mint in-game assets directly from the DAO. So the DAO has a mint of horses. If you have SLK, you can pay for your mint in SLK. SLK can also be used to purchase assets from other players in the Silks marketplace. So we will have a proprietary marketplace, and you could use SLK if the holder accepts it to buy their assets in the marketplace. You can also use you can also buy and sell SLK on decentralized exchanges. So they're called DEXs, and anybody can create a swap and say, I'm willing to make a market in SLK and swap with Ethereum or any other token. And an exchange may choose to pick us up. A primary exchange may choose to pick us up and list us and make a market in that token as well. So that's another way that you can transact with, and that SLK could flow within the ecosystem. Finally, there are other ways that we contemplate that are on our roadmap for the future, where you could use SLK to wager at the tracks, or to use in algorithmic racing games that we have on our roadmap for well into the future when horses retire. So these are examples of how the token would move around within the ecosystem. Now, I mentioned that the idea was to consolidate the governance rights within the token that was going to be used as a transaction token. And so SLK comes with governance rights that allow you, as the holder of that token, to vote on certain matters that are pertinent to the platform. Rule changes, for example, prize purse calculations and things like that. Anything critical to the application of the platform is typically conveyed to the holders of these governance tokens. And initially, the Game of Silks Corporation owns 100% of these tokens, and eventually it would flow through to the community, where eventually the community will have a real seat at the table. And that's, at a very high level, how tokens get into the market and how they move around within the ecosystem. Now, let's talk about the fundamental economics that drive this ecosystem so that you understand how it operates from a supply and demand perspective. The demand for a token or a currency is critical to the success and health of an economy. In the case of a traditional economy like the United States, the value of the dollar is driven by the organic demand for that dollar. Now, that organic demand in our economy comes from a few different places. It comes from the fact that you can only pay your taxes in the United States using US dollars. That creates massive organic demand for people that need to buy the dollars to pay their taxes. You can only transact using a dollar in a commercial business in pretty much every state in this country, which requires you to own dollars. And the US government is the largest employer in this country, and they only pay in dollars. So these are mechanisms that create intrinsic demand, and when people say, oh, I believe in the dollar because it's backed by a strong government, well, in reality, the only reason the dollar works, it's a piece of paper, is because there's organic demand. Now, in our economy, the same thing holds true. There has to be organic demand. Now, how does that work? We distribute SLK as awards for winning races and for breeding. That SLK eventually gets depleted, and the Dow is required to continue each year to award the players within the ecosystem with SLK. So how does it do that? Well, it becomes a natural customer for SLK and has to go into the market every time somebody wins a race, buy SLK in the open market, and then distribute it to that owner. So there's a natural demand that's created by the Dow, and it only can occur because the token has a fixed cap on it. It's a non-inflationary token. These are really critical things. There is no game right now that I'm aware of in the Web3 ecosystem that uses a model like this. There are NFT platforms that use models like this, and there are operating companies that use models like this. The most notable is Brave Technologies, which operates the Brave web browser. When you agree to accept their advertising, they give you back 70% of their fees that they collect for advertising. You get that in the form of a token called BAT, B-A-T. The way they acquire that token to give it to you is they have to buy it in the open market, and that creates the demand for the token, which is why it's valuable to you. Same thing happens here. So that is the economic principle that drives demand. And what you can see here is kind of a high-level view of all of this and how the Dow Treasury plays a part in this. So we talk about economies and treasuries and governments that are backed, whose currencies are backed by hard assets. Our country used to be one of those countries. Very few countries exist now that actually have hard assets that back their currencies. They're just, again, backed by the organic demand that are created by that. In the case of our economy, the way it works from the top down, we mint in-game assets, sell them to our community, to the public. That drives liquid currency assets into the Dow. There are other related revenues that come through to the Dow. So, for example, if we were to offer sponsorships or advertising to vendors that want to build a presence and speak to our community within the metaverse, that would be a source of revenue that's unrelated to minting. If we were building custom structures, for example, racetracks in the metaverse for companies that own racetracks in the real world, that would drive revenue to us as well. And then finally, royalties from the resale of our assets. All of that drives liquid currency into the Dow. The Dow then uses that currency in two ways. One, to fund the operations of the platform and grow it and develop it. That's basically paying Game of Silks to operate the platform. That is one reason that money comes out of the Dow. And the second reason, and the only other reason, is to repurchase SLK. And that's a large portion of what the Dow does, right? It takes in money and it converts it to SLK to distribute it as prize money to our community. And that's at a very high level how the economy works. Now, what I want to do is kind of lift the hood a little bit and share with you some of the assumptions and what's required really for this to work and where the vulnerabilities are. So, in order for an economy to be sustainable and healthy, we assume that there are two things that have to happen, right? The DAO has to have sufficient liquid assets to be able to pay for the operations of the platform and its ongoing operations, and it has to have sufficient capital to be able to repurchase SLK to redistribute to the community for the rewards and earnings. Those are the two major things that have to happen. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through the assumptions and the risk points for the economy. These are super important to understand because if any of these assumptions are wrong or fail, the economy fails. The first assumption is that the value of our in-game assets will increase over time. Now, the reason that this assumption exists and the substance for why the assumption should work is that as we grow our community, there are more people that want to be a part of the game. And when there are more people that want to be a part of the game, and there's a fixed supply of assets, that's really important to understand. The assets are fixed and the demand is endless, right? What happens? The price of everything goes up. So if you have 100 homes in a community and 50,000 buyers, they're going to bid up those homes, and the people with the most interest and the willingness to spend the most amount of money will pay and acquire those homes. The same thing takes place in every economy, in every asset, where there is a fixed supply and an endless amount of demand. And what you can see here is a graph that shows that to you. So as you look at the horizontal axis that says demand or buyers, as you move right on that axis, that means that there are more buyers coming into our game, more players coming into our game, and as they come in, the price is going to go up. And that's basic economics 101, and that is our first assumption. The second assumption is that the secondary market for our assets continues to grow. Now, this is a really easy assumption to understand because it's the relationship between the quantity of assets that we have available within our game and the assets that transact on the marketplace, or the volume of transactions on the marketplace. The more assets we have, the more transactions there will theoretically be. And as a result of all of that, there will be more royalties generated to fund the DAO. So very simple, the more assets we have, the more activity there is in the secondary market. The third assumption, which pulls everything together, is that the value of SLK will grow over time. And so I'm going to walk you through the reasoning and the growth loop that really lays this out. So starting with the community. The community grows, right? More and more people become aware of our game. More people that are sitting on the sidelines see the game come to life and want to be a part of it. And the community starts to build, right? As the community grows, the demand for our assets are going to grow. As the demand for our assets grows, the value of our assets grow because there's more demand than supply. As the value of our assets grow, so does the value of the treasury because there is more money coming into the treasury through mints and through royalties. As more money comes into the treasury, the economy becomes strong because the treasury has a lot of liquidity within it. As the economy strengthens, so does the demand for SLK, right? People want to buy dollars in third world countries because they believe that the US government is a stable government and that the rules that drive the value of the dollar are going to stay in place. And the same thing holds true in an economy like this. As the economy strengthens, so does the demand for our token because it's stable and has a lot of promise. And as the demand for our token grows, so does our community. And this is the growth loop that is driving all these, that is driven by all of these assumptions. Now, all of this has to happen. And candidly, this is an innovative economy that has never been created in a Web3 game before. We are a first of a kind. And we developed this economy over the course of the last year and a half with the intention of launching it this way. There are challenges with a DAO-based economy, and I want to go through them because they're very important. And our ears are on the ground, and we are living this every single day. And so as things develop within a very nascent environment, we need to be cognizant of it. So first, DAO, the idea of a DAO is a very new thing. And we need to understand that. The model that I just went through, and I spent the last 25 minutes explaining it, is complex and difficult to understand. In fact, I'm sure there are people that have read this and listened to this and still don't completely understand it. It is a complex economy. Two, the DAO structure, as I mentioned, is a nascent structure and it has vulnerabilities. There are many DAOs in the course of the last couple of months that have had challenges in both their ability to operate and their ability to comply with the regulatory environment. Some of them have closed down, others have modified the way they work. DAO is a big word and there are many ways to apply it, but there are challenges with it and it is vulnerable at its young stage right now. The fourth and probably the most important component here to our thinking is that introducing a native token very early in the development of a community and of a game like this creates a lot of risk around volatility and around liquidity. So what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is if we're investing real money into an economy and getting paid in a native token that has a relationship to the money that we're putting into it, but could potentially trade very differently, makes it very volatile. And so what are we playing for, right? At the end of the day, we don't know. SLK could go up, SLK could go down, and that's going to early on affect the game, especially early on because the community is small and the token is really not a known commodity yet. And then finally, there's regulatory risk around a native token. The SEC continues to come out and say that most cryptocurrencies are securities, and we don't know the direction that they're going to take, and we'd rather not be vulnerable to them. So this caused us over the last month to start thinking about, do we want to launch this way, or do we want to build into this economy over time? And we looked at our comps, and candidly, the most successful game out there today, and some of you have heard me mention this, and that's Sorare. Sorare is a Web3 fantasy game that has many similar elements in their gameplay to us. They're a much simpler concept. They're candidly very rudimentary, but they've got something really big that's happening to them. Their community is growing by leaps and bounds, and their game has taken off in a manner that is unprecedented. DraftKings, which many of you in the US may know as the leader in fantasy football and other fantasy sports, came out with essentially a copycat to Sorare for fantasy football. These games are really very simple. Instead of paying to draft a team, you actually own the players, but they make thousands of the same player cards. So you buy the cards, liquid assets go into the company. The company then uses a portion of that money to pay back the prize purses. So instead of paying an entry fee into a contest, you're actually just buying ownership of the players. Not that dissimilar to what we do. They provide liquidity, so their purses are paid, their prizes are paid in cash in the form of ETH. It's very simple to understand, and it's a proven model. And I think for those reasons, these companies have been incredibly successful. If we were to adopt a model like theirs initially to launch the platform, it would operate the same way. We would earn revenues through the sale of our mints and through our royalties and other sources of revenue that would flow through the Game of Silks to create the prize purses that get redistributed. So same economic benefits, the same flow, so the same economics, which we're going to show you, just a much, much simpler way to understand it, and a lot less risk involved in executing, both for the company and for the community. As a result of a lot of our analysis, we have decided that we think it is in the best interest of both the company and the community to launch the platform with a liquid economy and a liquid token rather than introducing a native token right at the outset. Our intention is to continue to evaluate the introduction of a native token and a DAO in the near future as we continue to see the development of regulation around it and see operating efficiencies coming from it, where people are developing best practices. We think it's too early to take the risk and that it's unnecessary for us. Now, the benefits of doing this are quite significant. It's a much simpler to understand model, which is going to lead to a much more rapid adoption and growth of our community. Right now, people are confused, and we think that's part of the reason, why it takes time for people to really understand what we're doing and adopt. Although we're growing at a nice pace, we could be growing at a faster pace, and community is very critical to our success. 2, it provides instant liquidity to our players. You're playing for real money. You're not playing for a native token anymore that has undefinable characteristics in terms of its value or could be very volatile. You're playing for cash. Whether you get it in ETH or in a US stable token, you can convert it instantly into cash. And so that creates liquidity for our community, which we think is very valuable and very easy to understand. And you'll see as we go through the economics in a minute of the actual game, how clear it becomes. 3, there is no exposure to DAO vulnerabilities early on, meaning that how does a DAO operate? What do people vote on? What happens if people are self-serving and try to control the DAO and heavy hitters, buy up all the tokens, etc.? Where does that leave us, and what kind of vulnerabilities does that create? We don't have to worry about that right now. We don't have to worry about operating the business like that right now because it's unnecessary. We can still create the same exact experience, actually a better experience in the short run, and wait for those wrinkles to be ironed out. And finally, there's less volatility in our model, which is a good thing, we think, early on. Again, we're talking about launching a very robust and ambitious platform, and we want to make it as easy as possible and as simple as possible and take out as much of the risk as possible. So it's our intention to launch the platform with a liquid token rather than the SLK token, and then as the market progresses, as we get our sea legs going, as the DAO model matures over the course of the coming months, perhaps into the coming year, we don't know. We have the model already built out, and we will transition to that model when it makes sense. So that brings us to part 2, which is the really meaty section of this. And what I'm going to do is share with you data that is going to be incredibly valuable for you to understand the game from an economic perspective and understand and begin to start thinking about what it means for you. Now, I'm going to start with a disclaimer, and it's really important for everybody to understand this. Any numbers that I'm going to present to you in this deck going forward that are related to what we refer to as earnings in the game are purely illustrations of one hypothetical scenario. They're not projections, they're not promises, and they're not representations of anything. What I did was create some assumptions, and then I loaded them into spreadsheets and did the work for you. You will have to do that work yourself because we can't tell you or promise you anything, right? What I can do is show you the assumptions, show you how the economy works, and then you can figure it out for yourself. But we did some of that work for you to make it easier for you, but I would encourage you to do your own work as it relates to this. Now, these disclaimers over time may change, but for right now, given how early we are in a very innovative project, it's very important for us to ensure that you have your eyes wide open. Okay. This is going to get really good, guys. I'm super excited to share this stuff with you. We all know the Silks economy is tethered to the in real life, to the real world thoroughbred racing economy. We know that $1 billion is paid out, more than $1 billion is paid out in prize purses each year. We know that there are more than 30,000 races in the U.S. that take place each year. And we know that there are approximately 20,000 rookies that enter the game as 2-year-olds. So we did a lot of work, and we figured out that there are roughly 45,000 horses that make up the field of U.S. thoroughbred racehorses every year, which means that of the 30,000 races that take place, there are about 45,000 horses that appear in those races, right? Which means that a large percentage of the 2-year-olds that come in are going to be part of those races. So let's say 75% of them are going to race, maybe more. That would be 15,000. And then there are another 30,000 horses that are older that are racing, that make up the additional horses to fill the field. Okay? It's important for you to understand that, because 2-year-olds are going to operate differently than 3-year-olds and then 4-year-olds, etc. And it's kind of hard to figure out the numbers without understanding the field. Next, in real life breeding, and I'm talking about the real world again. Because our game is tied to the real world, all of this data is incredibly relevant. In the real world, there are about 250 stallions that produce the bulk of the 20,000 yearlings that we're talking about, right? The 20,000 foals each year. Okay, the top stallions breed over 200 horses a year, and the average stallion breeds about 80 horses a year. Okay? So very, very small number of males that produce the annual crop of horses. Stallions can start breeding as early as 3 years old, and they can breed for most of their lives. A typical stallion will breed for 16 years. So you can do the math. 16 years at 200 horses a year is a lot of offspring. Each year, and this is probably the most important data points, each year, approximately 20 stallions replace the stallions that retire, which means that every crop of foals, every new crop of horses that enter the game each year, about 20 of them are going to become stallions. And the economics for stallions are quite commonly known. The leading stallions can charge upwards of $100,000 a pop. The most expensive stallions get over $250,000 for a breeding fee. And these stallions can produce many times over. So they earn millions, if not tens of millions of dollars a year. And some of the most valuable stallions are worth hundreds of millions of dollars. In the real world, let's talk about broodmares. You need 20,000 females to produce 20,000 foals. That's just basic biology, right? A female horse, known as a mare, can produce 1 horse a year. So you need 20,000 of them to create the crop of 20,000. And they're mating with 250 stallions. A broodmare, which is a mare that is designated as a mare that's going to produce offspring, can start producing as early as 3 years old and can produce up to approximately 15 foals in their lifetime. Sometimes broodmares are given a break for a year or two in between pregnancies, but they can produce for most of their lives. 15% of the annual crop of female horses will become broodmares after their racing career. So, 20,000 horses born a year. 10,000 females and 10,000 males. Of those 10,000, approximately 15% of them will go on to become broodmares. And broodmares have a different type of economics, and I'm going to go through that as it relates to our game in a further slide. Let's talk about racing earnings. And this, by the way, is an education around the real world, but because our game tracks the real world, it's very relevant to our game. In 2021, which is the latest year where we have full data, the number one horse, measured by its earnings, made $5.8 million. And the number 100 horse, so the next 100 horses, made somewhere between 5.8 million and $500,000. So then the top 100 horse made $500,000 in racing earnings, and the top 1,000 made 135,000, and so on and so forth. And so what you can see is that if your horse was in the top 5,000 horses racing, it would have earned at a minimum $57,000 last year, and at a maximum almost $6 million. Now, sometimes you hear people talk about the risk of horse racing and how not a lot of people make money. The reality is that that's true because horses cost a lot of money to maintain. I talk about a horse costing as much as $50,000 or $60,000 a year. So in the real world, when you make $60,000, you're basically breaking even, at least on the racing side. And so that's where that comes from. And you can see how the numbers play out over here. Now, in our game, there is no direct cost of maintenance that's scaled to the real world. And so that becomes irrelevant, making our game a much more rewarding game from an economic perspective than the real world. Let's keep going. There's some really juicy stuff over here. In 2021, you could race as a 2-year-old. So these horses were foaled in 2019. They were yearlings in 2020, and they raced as 2-year-olds in 2021. On the left side, the top 100 2-year-olds earned an average of $273,000 in their first year of racing. And you can see what the top 10 2-year-olds earned in their first full year of racing. You can also see their names. The same crop matriculated to become 3-year-olds the next year. And what you see is the same crop foaled in 2019 and the top 10 racers through August, because that's all the data we have. The top 100 3-year-olds averaged almost $500,000 in half a year, in 3/4 of a year. And you can see how much they made. And you can also notice, if you look carefully, that there isn't a single top 10 horse in year 2 that made the top 10 as a 3-year-old. Fascinating. So you might have a horse, just like in fantasy football, having a running back or a wide receiver that did nothing their first year, and then their second year, all of a sudden they broke out, or their third year, they broke out. Same thing happens with horses, which makes the game incredibly exciting, because you might buy a horse that was a dud as a 2-year-old, or just an average horse that all of a sudden breaks out as a 3-year-old and becomes a champion, and then goes on to become a stallion. So these are the facts. Let's keep going. Farms. A lot of these horses are owned by farms. There are businesses like Tropical Racing that literally raise horses to race them for themselves, for their companies, for their investors. In 2021, these are the top 10 farms and their racing earnings. And you can see the starters are the number of times that their horses started. And you can see that the top farm, Godolphin, which is owned by, I think, the Sheikh of Dubai, earned $18 million, over $18 million in 2021. And this should kind of give you just a scale of kind of what a really great farm in the real world could generate in revenues from racing. This isn't breeding, this is just racing. The breeding revenues are much, much larger. And you can see a farm with as little as 6 starts or Angie generated over $6 million in revenue from a very small group of horses. Okay. Let's get into the game. We're getting very close to starting to share some more meaningful and applied data to you. We track the real world economy, so we make assumptions around the game and are going to share with you information based on 4 major assumptions. One is that at scale, and when I mean at scale, I mean when we're dropping the full crop of yearlings and when that full crop is completely productive. So you're going to have horses that we all mint as 2-year-olds that may not race as a 2-year-old. They may not race till they're 3 years old. So we're talking about a few years out, or when the economy and the game is operating at scale. At scale, every year, there will be 20 to 30 people in our community that will mint a future stallion each year. Okay? It's just basic logic. If every crop has 20 horses that will become stallions, and we're minting that crop, 20 people in our community are going to end up getting one of these stallions. And they're going to be theoretically incredibly valuable, just like they are in the real world. At scale, about 1,125 players will mint a future broodmare each year. So we currently are forecasting 15,000 of the 20,000 yearlings that we believe will be worthy enough to create a great experience so that people will want. So we're even in the outer years, our intention is to cull the crop because there are just horses that will never race, and it's obvious they're never going to race, and they're such a crapshoot that we don't want to introduce that type of risk into the game. So we're basing this on 15,000 horses. Half of them are females, and about 15% of those females will go on to become broodmares to replace the retired broodmares. And of those, 1,125 people will mint those horses. At scale, the top 100 horses owned in the Silks metaverse will, in real life, win an average of $1 million in a year. And the range is $500,000 to $5 million. And you can see that comes from the 2021 data. In the real world, their horses will win that money. Okay, we're not talking anything about our game yet. We're talking just about the real world, and we're beginning to translate it into our game. At scale, the top 5,000 horses owned in the Silks metaverse will win in the real world at least $57,000. Okay? These are all facts that are applied to our game. Now I'm going to get into more granular data that will help you understand how to apply these facts to our game. And I'm just doing a little bit of math for you, but at this point, you're going to have to do that for yourself. We're making some very simple assumptions. We started the game with the assumption that we were going to, at the time where ETH was $4,000 per ETH. Today, ETH is trading at $1,500 or $1,600. We assumed that we could reach parity with the real world in about 7 years. Based on those numbers, we've remodeled the numbers to reflect ETH where it is today, and to also reflect the sentiment of our community in wanting to start this game at a certain place. And so we did some theoretical calculations to demonstrate what things could look like. And these are all hypothetical and theoretical. And again, we're just applying the real world data to this assumption that if we started the economy parity to the real world at 1% and grew it over 10 years to 40%, reaching a full field of 45,000 horses that are all minted in our game by the 6th year, because remember, there are going to be horses in our game that are not in the Silks metaverse because They didn't grow up as yearlings in our world. So it takes time for that to happen. Based on these assumptions, you can see the theoretical average earning per horse and maximum earning per horse, hypothetically, that what it could happen in our game. Okay, and these data points are derived from, again, public data around what really happened in the real world of horse racing, specifically thoroughbred horse racing. So you can see that theoretically an average horse in year one could earn $200, and that the number one horse in year one could earn $50,000, and that many horses will earn nothing. That's the worst case scenario. And what you can see as you read this table is that based on these assumptions in this hypothetical model, that by year 9, an average horse would earn $9,000 in that year, and that the best horse would earn $2 million in that year. And these are all derived from escalating percentages to the of our economy to the real world. So, for example, if we're minting our horses at $500 today, and an average horse sells for $50,000 in the real world, that's 1%. If that horse goes to $800, that's 2% or 1.5%. If it goes for $1,500, that's 3%, and so on and so forth. And that's how this model, that's how these assumptions are applied. Now, again, when I say average horse, I'm going to go back a couple of slides to slide, if we can roll back to slide 22. When I say average horse, I'm taking all of the horses, I'm dividing it by all the prize purses to arrive at the average, just like I did for the 2-year-olds. When I took the top 100 horses, I took all their earnings and I divided it. So when I say that the top 2-year-olds made $273,000 on average for 100 horses, what I'm really saying is that some horses made over $1 million and some horses made $150,000 or whatever the floor was. So keep that in mind when I talk about the possibility of what an average horse would earn and how that's calculated. Let's go to slide 26 and talk about breeding. We'll start with stallions and then we'll go to broodmares. And I purposefully don't have numbers on this page, and I'll verbalize them, but I don't have them because they're so silly that they're hard to believe. If you own a stallion, so there are 250 stallions that sire the majority of horses in the world, in the United States. Every year, 20 to 30 of those stallions are going to turn over, and every crop is going to have a new batch of horses that are going to become stallions. And let me tell you that the best horses in the world, from a racing perspective, are not necessarily the ones that are going to be stallions. There are stallions that have only won 1 or 2 or 3 races that have become some of the greatest stallions in the world. You can look up a current stallion called Tappet that I believe won 3 races. And early on in its life, this is a really interesting fact that Troy shared with me, as a stallion, you could buy a lifetime of breeding rights where you could breed 1 horse a year to Tappet. The cost for that lifetime breeding rights was $22,000. There came a point shortly thereafter where owning a piece of the rev share for that stallion went up to $2 million because that stallion is producing some of the best foals in the world, some of the best racehorses in the world. 20 people in this community are gonna pull a stallion on the day they mint. A horse that will become a stallion. Whether they keep it or not, they won't even know it's going to become a stallion because it's all speculative. That stallion, on average, will sire about 140 horses, foals a year for 16 years. Okay? These are facts in the real world that we're applying to our game. What I can tell you is, I'm just going to do the math for you. If you use the assumption that we're able to start at 1% and get to 40% over 10 years, and that our game is healthy and growing, the theoretical lifetime earnings of a stallion comes in at just under $4 million. Okay, I'm going to say that again. If you apply the math, and I encourage you to do it in your own spreadsheet to figure it out. We've done it just using these assumptions, which again are just assumptions, they're hypothetical. And you do the math. 20 people to 30 people will end up with stallions, and those stallions will earn in an economy that pays out the calculations and performs the way the assumptions play out over here. Nearly $4 million over the lifetime of that stallion. That doesn't mean that the stallion is worth anything near that. We assume that the market will calculate the present value of and discount it, and consider all kinds of other risks associated with it to determine the value, and that value will move around a lot over time. We also believe that a horse is probably going to trade 20 or 30 times, and until it's, people figure out the value of the horse. So we think there's going to be a lot of activity, both from pin hooking and more. So pretty exciting numbers when you really think about what the potential is. And again, we could be growing this much faster. We could be growing it much slower than the real economy. I will tell you that the numbers that we are using in terms of the size of our community to achieve these data points are very, very small relative to the proven economies that are out there and the communities that are out there that are in fantasy, and Web3. So if you look at Sorare's growth rate, we're projecting we modeled this hypothetical scenario. We did the math for this hypothetical scenario, based on a very small subset of what they've actually experienced and enjoyed. So there's a lot of room if we're successful, and obviously there's a lot of room downwards if we're not as successful. Let's talk about broodmares, because there are a lot of broodmares that are coming. Right? Of each annual crop of yearlings, we expect about 1,125 broodmares to be minted in that population. 20,000 broodmares are required to produce 20,000 horses. A broodmare can produce 15 during their lifetime approximately. And we did the math, again, based on these assumptions for your benefit. Comes out to about $30,000 in lifetime earnings for a broodmare. Now, what's really interesting about a broodmare versus a stallion is when you get a male horse versus a female horse, the male horse will have very little value after its racing career if it's not a stallion. And obviously there are very few stallions. So you're trading off the possibility of a lottery ticket for a broodmare that is going to have a very rich life as a breeder after her racing career, and there are a lot of broodmares. So there's a high probability that your female horse that was a good racer is going to have value beyond her racing career. And so there are risks and rewards on both sides. Some people will say, I want a male horse, and some people will say, I want a female horse. One is less risky, one is more risky, but provides a much greater upside. So these are little nuances in horse racing that you're going to think about as you think about, what do I want to own? What do I want my stable to look like? And the prize money that will be paid out as breeding fees are going to be different percentages for stallions than they are for broodmares, because stallions are producing so much more than broodmares that we felt that because we were constructing this economy in a way where we wanted it balanced a little more, the game currently is modeled to pass a larger percentage of the mint to the broodmare, to the owner of the broodmare, than to the stallion. Remember that we're minting these horses as a community at $500 a horse. And I shared with you kind of what the math looks like, what it could look like. I'm going to end this presentation because we're approaching an hour. I've got a lot more information, but I'm going to share 2 more slides that are going to be, I think, fascinating for everybody. We all talk about our farms. I've shared with you the real farms, and I'm going to share with you the math that we did using the assumptions that we shared with you and how that would play out if we hit those, if those assumptions were accurate. If you own a 10-acre public farm, that farm today, if you bought it right now, would cost you approximately 2.5 ETH, right? Or about $4,000-ish dollars. That's based on the fact that the floor is, hovering around 0.25 for this land, and that ETH is at 1,500. ETH today is at 1,650, and our floor, if you were to take out 10 pieces, is probably going to be higher than that. But this is an order of magnitude calculation. We have not published the cost of a stable yet, so I'm not revealing that. But you need a stable as well. Now, what you see here is 2 scenarios, 2 hypothetical scenarios. Scenario 1, where you build a farm and you attract 10 average performing horses to stable with you in your farm over a 10-year period. Now, keep in mind that that is almost impossible because you're not going to want a horse there for 10 years. So we're assuming that as the horse progresses from a race horse to a breeding horse or ends its career, that you're replacing that horse with a horse of similar stature, an average horse. So if you own a 10-acre farm with a stable with 10 stalls, and you're housing 10 average horses for 10 years, if you charge 5% of their earnings, of their prizes, you could expect under this hypothetical scenario to earn $16,500 during that period. And if it was 10%, you would earn double that. Now, if you're good enough to be able to attract 10 of the top 1,000 horses over a 10-year period, the numbers are quite staggering. So you can see that the productivity and the way you play the game, your skill, is going to swing the pendulum quite significantly in the value of a farm. It's all about skill. There's a little bit of luck involved, but it's about identifying the best horses to partner with you, the best horses, and incentivizing them in ways that will cause them to want to be a part of your farm. Now, you might be able to get that horse to lock up for a long period of time because the horse hasn't proved himself or because the owner of that horse doesn't know what they have. Or you could play the game a different way, and we'll talk more about this in my next AMA when we're going to talk about strategy and gameplay. And you might buy a couple of high-quality horses, put them in your stables to attract better quality horses. So there's going to be a lot of ways to get there. But this just gives you a little bit on the economics of what a farm might look like. Now, keep in mind, you can build a farm that's as big as 100 acres. So you can multiply these numbers by 10 times to see what that would look like. In closing, I'm going to talk about risk diversification because this is really critical. In fantasy, in a lot of these fantasy games where you're buying the players, the cards, they print thousands of them. So in Sorare, there are 5,000 cards for every player. In our game, there's only one horse. But you can build a syndicate or a partnership or a group of people that own that horse together. So you buy the horse. If you own it completely, your exposure, if you minted and kept the horse, is $500. If you syndicate the horse, in other words, you bring in friends, family, or you sell in the open market your share of the horse and you keep 10%, you now have a risk of $50. You could lose $50, as can anybody in your syndicate. Or you could be syndicating your horses for more than you paid for them and you have nothing at stake. But you can also get in as a limited partner in these horses for as little as $50 if the owner is willing to sell you his share at the mint. If you stable the horse to a 100-acre horse farm, you now have an interest in 99 other horses in their winnings. You don't own the other horses, but in their winnings while they're in the farm. And those horses have an interest in 99% of your horse collectively. Which means you've just reduced your risk in that horse or your exposure in that horse to $5, right? Now remember, you still own that horse. So you have exposure beyond that, but you're sharing in the winnings of 99 other horses. So you've now brought your exposure down to 5%. And to 1% or $5. And finally, if you take a syndicated horse and stable that horse, so you've combined stabling and syndication in one, and you stable that horse on a 100-acre farm where you own 10% of that horse, you have now essentially invested in that horse 50 cents, right? You're exposed to that horse for 50 cents or 1/10 of 1%. So as you can see, anybody can play this game. Anybody can play this game. Now remember, we're talking about $500 today. If this model grows based on the assumptions, there are going to be horses that potentially could be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars in this game. No different than Zedrun, no different than Sorare. There are Sorare players that sell for tens of thousands of dollars. Rainmakers, their most expensive category is a $30,000, $32,000 card. So there's something for everybody, and we anticipate that many people within our community, as this game grows, will have accumulated assets that could be worth a lot of money. And they may want to diversify. They may want to take chips off the table, etc. But they're going to be the foundation that's going to stimulate this economy as it grows to those levels. And I didn't show you an example of what a $50,000 horse might look like, but if you take 1/10 of 1% of that, it's still affordable to everybody in this community. So again, there are lots of ways to play this game and lots of entry points, and that is what I'm going to talk about in my next AMA, where we'll be discussing strategies, we'll be discussing risk diversification, we'll discuss different ways to play the game, different types of farms that you can create, how you can make money playing the game, etc. That concludes the presentation, and then with that, I know I've given you a tremendous amount of information here, and I hopefully gave you context to what this could be, and I'm happy to take about 20 minutes of questions. You're welcome.
Good morning, guys. Happy to snag the first question, and excellent presentation, Dan. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So closely to the whole presentation, we fair to assume that we're starting out here kind of at 1% of what we're seeing in the real world. And if so, are we saying then that when it comes to race payouts for these horses, are we also looking at 1% or something different?
So what I can tell you is that we will at some point publish the prize purse for the first year. We anticipate that prize purse to be actually more than 1%. And the reason for that is because breeding takes time. And so when you look at the model, there's a lot of revenue coming in early on. And since there's no breeding taking place, you can accelerate the growth of the racing side faster. So the answer is we anticipate it will be greater than 1%, and we will be publishing that at some point before the actual racing starts.
Great, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Just another fox. We can't
Oh,
hear
yes,
you.
can you hear me?
Oh, now we can hear you.
Okay, so my question is just in regard to the horses. If you guys have horses that are not in the mint, and then those horses eventually go on to become a stallion or possibly a broodmare, will you guys always mint horses out of the next crop, not limit the crop by the horses that aren't maybe in the prior year? Does that make sense?
It does. So our intention is to mint, ultimately to mint every horse that's out there. We're starting the game by curating the collection because we really want everybody to have a great experience. And when you take out, a large chunk of the bottom half of the horses, what's going to happen is it's going to give everybody an opportunity that's literally 2 or 3 times greater than in the real world, and it'll be a lot flatter from a risk perspective, and just make it a much more enjoyable experience for everybody. Over time, as the community grows, we will incorporate more and more players, so more and more horses. And in fact, in our game early on, if we don't mint a horse early on and that horse pops up, and we think it's qualified, we may mint that horse and put it up for sale for the community. So we anticipate that will happen. There are a lot of horses that we just don't have the data for those horses, and that data comes up when they start working out or when they are scheduled to race. Usually it's when they start working out, because you can't race a horse unless they have public workout data, and that's the first time a lot of people get to even know that horse exists.
Yep. I was just mainly worried about them coming into the system somehow and not being able to come into the game, but you guys got all that figured out, so thank you. I appreciate it.
We sure do. Thanks for coming up.
Hey, what's up, guys? Great project. I just wanted to ask what you guys feel about, because 500 USD is quite high and it is a bear market. So I'm thinking, wouldn't be a smarter strategy to kind of lower the price and get more sold rather than having a bunch that isn't sold?
It's a great question. The original mint price of these horses, based on the Ethereum, based on when we developed the model, was actually almost 10 times the price of this. We have done a lot of analysis, a lot of communication with our community, a lot of game theory development, and we believe this is the right strategy. We also believe that the horses will eventually all sell. We are in nowhere. This is not a PFP project. We don't have to sell out of the mint in an hour. The horses are not racing till early next year. So we have plenty of time to grow this community and to sell through the horses. We have no concern whatsoever about that. And we feel like this is the right price point. We've had the discussions with the community. We have a committee from within the community, and we've done our homework, so we feel very good about it.
Great, thanks, Dan. Can I just ask one more?
Sure.
Thank you. I was wondering, will the horses have the real names of the real horses in the real world? And if they do, will that not infringe, or whatever you call it, on the copyright law?
Sure. So many people in the community know the answer to that, but I'll share it with you, and I'll remind the community of two things. One is that the horses will have the real names, although when a horse is sold as a yearling, it almost unconditionally does not have a name. It hasn't been named yet. And the reason it hasn't been named yet is because typically people like to buy horses and name them themselves. So when you get your horse, it is unlikely it will have a name right away. You'll be able to identify the horse in the real world. And when the horse is named and the name is published, your NFT will be updated with the real name of the real horse. So that will answer the first piece. And the second piece, with regards to infringement, there's a ton of content on that online. We are protected by fantasy laws. There's clear data and law in the United States that allows us to do what we're doing, that protects for the public domain, and specifically for applications like what we're doing, the ability to use historical statistical sports data attached to the name of the competitor for purposes of a fantasy game. The only thing we can't do is we can't attach the real picture of the horse, and we cannot attach the silks of the real owner without their permission and without paying a licensing fee. And we don't do either of those, and neither of those are necessary for the game. So we have been advised that we're in complete compliance with the law.
Okay, thank you, man. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Hey, how's it going, guys? Thanks for the presentation. My head is spinning here, right? But I just had a quick question. This probably may have been answered before, but so you have an avatar and you can mint a horse $100 per avatar. It's one horse, and then say you wanted to buy into a syndication of a horse, do you have to have an avatar?
Okay, your voice is very low on this. I don't know what's wrong with the volume, but what I
Sorry,
heard.
let me turn my mic up.
Okay,
a
now
little
you
bit.
sound.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I think what you
Okay.
asked is whether you need an avatar to buy into a syndicate.
Exactly.
The answer is you don't, as long as you don't own as long as you're not buying the governance token. So every horse has a governance token which controls the horse, and then limited tokens that give you an interest in the horse. If you own the governance token, you need an avatar. If you're just buying a little piece of the horse, you don't.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey guys, I was wondering, how are the payouts going to be done? Is that going to be in ETH or USDC? Like the numbers here presented are USD, I'm assuming. How are the payouts going to be done initially? I know eventually we'll have SLK, but how is that going to work initially?
Yeah, so initially, if you go back, because this is going to be available for everybody to look at, you'll see that we made the decision, and it's in the middle of the deck, that we're going to launch the game on a cash basis, which means we are going to use a liquid third-party token. We haven't finalized it, but I will tell you it will probably either be Ethereum or a layer 2. As long as Ethereum is stable, we're going to go with some. Our intention is to get in your hands rewards that you can literally convert to cash if that's what you want to do. So it's going to be a token like that.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
You're welcome. And those numbers, which again are hypothetical, are all presented in USD.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, guys.
You're welcome.
Hey guys, sorry I was on there. I had a quick question. Great job, Dan. Very helpful. I just minted. The public mint went on right now, like 15 minutes ago. I just minted an 8 with a silks chain, so I'm pretty fired up with that.
Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, and it's funny because I minted. That was my 20th mint of an avatar, and my question is this: like, can we syndicate? Like, if I have 20 avatars, right? Can I syndicate? I guess that's the word, syndicate the avatar, or let's say rent out that avatar so that somebody else can use a Genesis avatar, or am I the only one that can use those avatars?
So that's a really good question. There are a lot of guilds that have been talking to us about the idea of allowing what you just described. It's not on our roadmap right now. You cannot rent out your avatar, at least using our technology. If there's a way you can do it where you're still, where you still control the avatar, we don't care who owns it. We're gonna literally pay that wallet. So if there's a way you can do that and protect yourself by renting it out, you can do that on your own. But we've had enough inquiries where it's probably going to end up on our roadmap at some point. It's just not a priority for us right now.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it. And
You're
thanks,
welcome.
everybody.
Congrats on the mint. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was like the 19th out of my 20th mint. I just hit. And I had a lot of commons before that, so I was like, out of 20, it's a numbers game, like everything else.
It always is. Yeah.
All right, guys, I'm gonna go celebrate. We'll see you. got it. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Hey, so I had a question about how the horse minting, the amount of time that we'll have. You said the horses don't start racing to the beginning of next year. Um, and if we wanted to buy more avatars between now and mint time, I just imagine it's a big expense to buy a bunch of avatars and then mint a bunch of horses all in the same day. And, I'm afraid of a gas war or whatever's going to happen the day that everyone tries to mint all their horses. So, is there an estimated amount of time that we'll have to mint our horses?
Yeah, so if you go to my last AMA, I don't know if it's summarized. If it is, the information is there. There are a bunch of members that have websites that will tell you that as well. I'll give you a quick summary. The mint is a 4-day mint, so you'll be able to mint over 4 days. And then if you miss that mint, you'll be able to mint at a higher price through December. So that's a courtesy in case you missed it to our community. And during this period, there will also be live auctions of revealed horses, and obviously a secondary market of unrevealed horses, because people will be able to choose when to reveal their individual horse. So you'll have plenty of time over that 4-day period. And as it relates again to the avatar sale is going to be closed to the public and to our community. Candidly, I believe the last day that you can mint publicly is the 19th, if I'm correct. Ben, you can just verify that for the community. And then after that, the only way to mint an avatar will be either through a promotion like we did with VSP and Knights of Degen, or a special advertising program that we do with a company. Short of that, our intention, at least in the short run, is not to open the mint back up.
Got it. I got one more question. I did come from the VSP community, so
Awesome.
that's why I guess I didn't know about the previous AMA, but and I'm trying to kind of get to speed here. But my other question is, when there ends up being, 30,000 horses further down the line, and there's only, I guess at this point, there's 6,500 avatars. Let's say there's 10,000 at the end, or whatever the total number is. How do the other horses get minted? Is it just random players of the game, or?
That's a good question. So we have 10,000 Genesis avatars. The Genesis avatars come with a lot of utility. The most significant one is that you get a lifetime mint pass, which means that every year you can mint one new horse from the crop. Since there are only 10,000, that right goes to those 10,000. After 10,000, if we're minting more than that, we will have a separate schema for them, and we haven't published that yet. Further, you still need an avatar to play the game, and there will be generic avatars or non-Genesis avatars that will be introduced to the game once we sell through the collection of 10,000. So they will have an opportunity to play the game. They will not have an opportunity to mint, or at least not on the same basis that we do. It might be a lottery system. It might be something else, but we have not published that yet. So the best way, if you know that you're going to want to mint every year, is to assemble a collection of avatars that represent the number of horses. And for the community's benefit, since you asked, Chris, the benefit of minting is that you're playing another game, right? You're getting a lottery ticket to a random horse that could be very valuable, and you're getting it at a price point that we've set that we believe is kind of below the floor of an average horse. That's the advantage of the mint. Outside of that, anybody can buy a horse in the secondary market that's revealed or unrevealed for that matter. So, I went through what the numbers could potentially look like. We anticipate we're a community of a few thousand people right now that are active holders of our assets. We believe that once the horse drop takes place and the metaverse opens, that we're going to begin aggressively growing, organically growing, because a lot of people are going to see what's going on and they're going to want to be a part of this. Once that happens, we believe that that these avatars, are going to be incredible. This is the most rare asset in our collection, right? And I don't think there's going to be an asset. Well, there may be stables and other structures that are very limited and custom and things like that, but in terms of things that are going to be available to the general community, this is the rarest asset that we anticipate having out there for right now.
Very cool. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you and welcome. And we welcome. I should have welcomed everybody that's new to the community, which I'm going to do right now. Welcome to the VSP holders that have joined. Welcome to the Knights of DGen. And we'll be bringing in other communities in the future as well to build this incredible thing up. So we're excited to have you guys. Eddie.
Hey, Ben. Yeah, I'll be brief. I know you have a hard stop as well. Hey, I want to follow up on a previous question where you said that once a horse has a name, it will be updated and we can recognize him. I wanted to know if before the horse gets a name, will we see its sire and dam in its properties?
Oh, absolutely. You're going to know exactly what you got the minute you get it. And we're going to teach you how to figure that out. You'll be able to actually pull the transaction document when that horse was sold, right? So if that horse was sold at an auction, you'll be able to pull the sheet on that horse and learn everything about that horse. You'll be able to go online and learn everything about the entire bloodline without the name. Once the name comes, we'll attach it to the NFT and the horse will be named. But until that happens, it's still going to be fully recognizable.
Perfect. Thank you.
And I know somebody in the Discord asked if the horses are going to be the same color as the real horses, and the answer is yes. They are going to have the same color as the real horse.
Great. Thanks.
Yep. I can take. I'll take 2 more questions if they're quick.
Hey guys, thanks. Always bringing me up. I appreciate it. Question on data. Data is so valuable here, and with there being pretty much a monopoly in horse racing on who owns the data, how are we as a community going to get the data attached to all of these horses? Is there a agreement with Equibase? Is there a partnership that's needed, or is there a way around that?
So it's a good question. The white paper actually addresses our strategy for a decentralized, crowd-funded development of a database. But there's so much public data out there that we don't need it. Just the question, we don't need it. We don't need to license it. It's there. The question is, if we want to bring it in and integrate it into our platform, as opposed to directing our community to third-party sites, we then have to either own the data or we have to license the data. And both of those are options, and we have strategies around both of them. In the beginning, we're going to be providing links and information and education on how to acquire the data. But ultimately, over time, the data will become resident on our platform through a combination of crowdsourcing from the community, so data mining, that's where the community will be incentivized to do that. Oracles that go out and get the data. So, for example, when horses race, we need to know what the outcome of those races were, right? There are thousands of data of places you can go to, from newspapers to the track sites, to Equibase, which offers a public access to a lot of their information, to Equine Line, to daily racing forums, to 150 other handicapping sites to get that data. So the data is ubiquitous. It's just a question of getting it organized on our site, and it'll take us time to do that, but it's not going to stop anybody from being able to get there. It's just going to be another step.
That's great info, because if you can break up the monopoly, we'd love to see it.
Yeah, we don't want to be disruptive to the industry, but we actually, the data is available to everybody. So there's, sports, the beauty of sports is that sports exists because of media and data. And if they don't allow their data to be consumed publicly, they have nothing, right? You can't bet on races. You can't follow a player or a sport, any sport for that matter, without having access to data that's in the public domain. And so that's the beautiful thing, and that's why fantasy is able to exist the way it does.
Thanks, guys.
Yep. One more question.
Hey, how we doing today? You hear me?
Good. I love the
Good.
avatar.
Thank you. I had a question that was on land. As far as I forget how many acres there is out there for the whole thing, but after like 10 years or so, with all the breeding that's going to happen, and it's always going to be a mint every year, about 20,000 or 10,000 horses or whatever was set at. At some point, aren't we going to run out of land for all these horses? Because you're going to have horses running, you're going to have horses, that you've had for 5, 10 years and whatnot. What do we do about the land situation further down the line? Is my question, I guess.
Yep. So we've modeled what that looks like, and we think that there's plenty of land available. There's actually more land available than we will need, and we'll be using the excess land for other applications over time. That's on our internal roadmap. But we did the math, like how many, horses have a life cycle, right? So eventually, they hit a cap, right? They hit a maximum. And we've done the math, and we believe that the size of our metaverse is sufficient to grow into over a very long period of time. So it's not going to be a concern.
All right, excellent. Thank you. I love the
You're
project, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being a part of the community. We're excited. We're excited for all of us. So yeah, thanks.
Nice.
Yep. And on that note, I just want to thank everybody for their time.